Today, I am joined by Heather Hayes from Heather R. Hayes and Associates. We are filming an extremely special video. And the reason why it's such a special video is because today marks Heather's 40th consecutive year of sobriety. Heather, let the world know what your sobriety date is.
So my sobriety date is February 24th, 1982. Today, what that means is a date that for a lot of day at a times, I have not found it necessary to drink or use drugs. And when we hit that date, that anniversary date, then I will have been in continuous recovery for 40 years. And so part of my thinking, I kept thinking, well, 40 years is a big marker. It's a big deal. Like I think about 40 years. I remember when I was first in rehab and I thought, wow, a month, like that's a huge deal. And then if somebody had like 6 months, I thought, oh gosh, they're like out of the woods. They're great. Everything's okay. And I would sit and think about and wonder. I was always kind of a wondering child anyway. I would often wonder a lot of different things. I would wonder, like, why are we here? What's it all about? What's the meaning of life? I'd look up in the sky when I was little and see all these stars and wonder, like, was I just a speck in the universe? And what was my purpose and point? And why was there so much pain? And then when I came into recovery, a lot of things started to make sense of those questions I'd asked since I was tiny. But then I would wonder, talk about don't project, but hey, we do the best we can. I'd be like, well, what will I be like? What will I be doing? Like, what will my life be like when I have 6 months, when I have a year? Like, wow, what if I had 5 years? What if I had 10 years? So I remember thinking like, God, if I had 40 years, it'd be 2022. That's a long time from now. Same thing as if I had 50 years in between, So, but just that kind of like wondering and, what'll happen, what am I going to do when I grow up? What am I going to be like? And I think part of that also comes from like, for me in early recovery, I got clean young. So the majority of my story is that of a addicted and emotionally traumatized, young adult, adolescent. Mine is a story of a young person. That's the majority of my use. And so when I went into treatment, there weren't very many places. There were like 2 places in Atlanta. And so I went into treatment and I ended up at this facility that treated addicted physicians. And I was a college student. I wasn't a physician, so I kind of looked around at them and I thought, oh, we've made a really grave mistake here. Like, what am I doing here? Like, I don't belong here. And I would hear them talk about, they'd lost their cars, they'd lost their jobs, they'd gotten DUIs, they'd lost their spouses, and I didn't have any of that. But more painful for me was that acknowledgement that at 21 years old, and even earlier, that I had lost my sense of self. And I think that was some of that seeking. It was like, I didn't know who I was. I had ideas when I was little, like what I wanted to be, what my moral compass was. And then I didn't know how to put into sense that when I used, I went every way off of my moral compass, and then who is that? I mean, I can't say it's not me because it's me, but it's me and it's me on drugs. So part of it too is I think I, was relieved when I got into the doors of treatment and into the doors of recovery to learn that I wasn't crazy. I had started studying psychology as an attempt to, stop doing so much cocaine and drinking so much and not feeling so crazy all the time. And really, like, a psych major is not a good thing to do when you're like, suddenly I had every disorder. I was sure of it. And it probably looked like I had just about every disorder, quite frankly. I was young, raw, angry, lost, no sense of self, no self-esteem, angry at my parents, came from a super chaotic family system. So there was just a lot to unpack, in every area. I was a college student and I was failing out of college. So I was a Southern woman and I didn't fit in there. I was, I couldn't, my relationships with friends weren't great. My relationships with guys weren't great. So I just didn't really know how to do any of it. So I was really just kind of like this lost cork. In fact, I wasn't even clear. I can remember. So I went into treatment. It was my idea. And it was kind of my idea. It was my idea because I, for a while, had been trying to stop. I'd had some great people. My parents, when I was little, would take me to therapist. And, I'd go in, I'd get high, go sit on the sofa and come out. And they'd be like, how was your session? And I'd be like, haha, I just napped for $75 nap. Because it was only $75 for a session back then. That was a lot. So somewhere along the way, I had met a doctor who I really kind of connected to. And I'd only seen him like once or twice. When I was in high school, I'd run away from home. I was kind of living out on the streets. And my third year of college, it was a mess. I couldn't stop using. I couldn't stop doing Quaaludes, cocaine, just about a quart of vodka a day, marijuana all day long. Loved the amphetamines. Would feel like I was going crazy from them. Would have to take the edge off with the downers. And I blacking out all the time. And so I started, I went to him. I, out of the blue, said, I want to go see that guy. Dr. Butcher was his name. And I said, I can't reel it in. I think I'm addicted. There are days I just, it's just out of control. And I didn't know he was in recovery himself. So that was like a real grace moment. And he knew exactly what to do with me. He first said, you want to go to rehab? I'm like, no, no, that's not what I'm, So he kept giving me these little assignments, why don't you go out and just have 2 beers and then call it there. So I had spent 8 or 9 months just struggling, to reel it in. And I just couldn't do it. So I decided, I reached out to him and decided to go, to go to treatment and get help. And, but when I got there, I thought it was going to be like hippie camp. It was the early 80s. I even wore this hippie headband around my, I had my gauze top, and I get in there and it's it's all these doctors asking me what my drug of choice is. And I'm like, why do you have to choose? I didn't get it. So it was interesting. But a few weeks in, I really started to get that I was going to be dead or crazy or there weren't a lot of great options of where my life was headed. And when I was using, I used to say, you only go around once. So, live hard. And if you don't, then you're about 25, you'll probably die anyway. So I didn't think I ever could even imagine, from that young, youthful seeker, what it's going to be like, I was, just so lost,
And what would you say to other adolescents who are kind of in that sort of space that you were in?
That's such a great question. So first off, when I first got into recovery, one of my big things too is I was so frozen, I couldn't shed a tear. I could tell you about these hard things that could happen. And it was like telling you I was going to the store to buy soda pop, So the fact I can even have emotion today is huge. But what I would say is that, one of the beauties, I love working with young people. I like all ages, but there's something just so near and dear to my heart because there's something so raw. When you're in that much pain and you're young, and as I looked back, one of the first family sessions I had with my parents, I was like, why didn't you do anything earlier? Like, I could have gone, I mean, at 15, at 16, it would have saved me, so much. But even at 21, I was so grateful. It's like my whole life has just been like now decades of having this amazing fellowship, program and recovery, tools available to me, support systems. And, I like something like sort of my spiritual awakening early on was kind of getting that knowledge that my best thinking ended me up where I was at, and that there was hope that other people could get better. And the key was just, if no matter what, I just close that door and say to myself a day at a time, using's not an option, no matter what. No matter what. Like, because I knew if I said to myself, I'll never use unless I'm on top of a phone pole in Timbuktu and there's a pile of cocaine up there, somehow, some way I'd find myself in Timbuktu on top of a phone pole, and there it would be. So maybe a little different than how we're taught to like say, I won't use today and maybe tomorrow. For me, when I finally kind of got that realization, and I'm not saying it's been an easy ride. I mean, it's been a long, strange trip along the ways, but that helped me to really, there was something about that realization and that commitment to myself daily that really helped put the cravings for me at bay. Really kind of slowed them down some. And, and I would remind myself, no matter how bad it got, there was only one way to make it worse, and that was, to go out and use. And so that opened up for me a whole new world, and slowly, like to have all that help, all that support around me, the amazing, amazing mentors and friends that taught me things like I didn't have to be perfect. And like I could wake up and my goal of the day could just be like that I'd make my bed. It didn't have to be, I knew what I was going to do in my career and I knew exactly what I'd look like at, when I had 40 years or 30 years and so it allowed me to go back to school and to be upfront and honest about my deficits. Like I didn't know how to study. I didn't know how to make friends at school. I didn't know how to not use, I didn't know how to connect with people. I didn't know how to connect with myself. I didn't know how to love myself. I didn't know how to appreciate, who I was. And I really, leaned on a lot of people along the way who really helped love me until I could learn to love myself. They could see the value in me before I could see it in myself. And it allowed me to like go through almost all of my 20s, my 30s, my 40s, my 50s with this beautiful program of recovery, that has allowed me to really create, a beautiful life, where I'm able to have everything I want and way more. Like, so my young person's dilemma was, I'm in rehab and I'm saying, oh God, here I am. Like, I'm going to be boring. It's going to be awful. My life, Friday night, you sit home, you paint your nails. And fortunately, like a big part, I had some great friends and we had so much fun. I have one of my best friends named Susie. I met her like her third day in the program. Or maybe she had like a week and I had like 9 months, and it was this Halloween, this Halloween costume dance at one of the recovery clubhouses. And anyway, she and we just had like the best time. Like we would laugh, we would get into, mischiefs together. Like we'd go out dancing, we'd go to concerts. There was a place downtown called the Color Box that had every Sunday night was disco hell dance night. And so we were always, going out and doing fun things and doing them, sober, doing them clean, So that was great. Like being able to incorporate really fun stuff and not having to clean up a mess the next day, and bringing in, and trying new things and looking at having a good career and being able to, like, really all those things that began to become mine, as who I was as a person. But when I first went into treatment, I mean, I literally, like, people would come up and like want to pet me on the head and be like, "Oh, she's so cute and shy." And I'm like, I don't feel really cute and I'm not shy, but I can't talk because my social lubricant is now gone. So, I mean, I was literally almost like a mute, which is so not me for those who know me. But I was back then.
And how would you advise young people then to find that support network? And because you had this group of friends and these mentors, but I imagine they didn't just come out of nowhere.
Yeah, no, for me, I found them in the 12-step recovery groups, and that was great. And that was my solid base. That was like my foundation. And then as time went on, I met friends, I had some great friends. Like when I was an undergrad at Emory, one of my best friends, we got to know each other, but she didn't drink, she didn't do drugs, and she didn't because she had lupus. And, her friendship was so important to me on so many different levels. Like, she was supportive of me. Here was someone I could be great friends with, who was fun, and we had a great time. And it also helped me when I would get into self-pity, particularly in college. I was like, how come everybody else gets to go to frat parties? How come everybody else gets to, and then I would think, at least I have an illness where I have choice. I can choose to be in recovery today. So, again, I think for me, it was the 12-step recovery. And then from there, it helped me spring into other areas. Like, a lot of my friends are therapists. A lot of my friends are in recovery. I have a whole group of friends that I'm close with because I ride horses competitively. So they're my horse friends, my horse show buddies, we share that passion. Friends that I work out with, friends that I, for a while, I just wanted to try new things. I took cooking classes for a while. I love to cook, so I have friends and we love to cook and we get together and talk about, like foodie stuff.
And I think as a young person, there's always that fear, though, that when you meet someone new or try something new and you have to say, "Oh, I don't drink," and expect the kind of questions and how did you deal with that? How did you?
It's interesting. Initially, I had a lot of shame around it. And so I learned to just, if somebody said, "Do you want to drink?" that I could just go, "No, thanks." Or I could say, "No, I don't drink." And then, I think as I got older, and maybe there's a little bit of me being a little bit asinine about it, but sometimes, like, I've been at restaurants before where someone would come up, like the server would come up and be like, "Here's a complimentary glass of wine." And I go, "I'm in recovery. You should have asked me first. I don't know. Thank you." And it's dangerous. Like, let's raise our awareness about it too. But I didn't do that in the beginning. I didn't do that in the beginning. But as I got to know people and felt more comfortable, friends, I would, again, I think I had enough friends, especially early on, that were also in recovery, and we do things together where it wasn't really an issue. We were just all out there in it together. But it's hard, but often people won't push. If you say, "No, I don't drink," or "No, thank you," or even, I think in 2022, it's a lot easier to say I'm in recovery and people know what that means. That's what I say all the time now. I sort of sing it proud, but the stigma of it is lessened.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And so could you tell us a little bit about how you got to the place you are today?
Absolutely. So I came in and I had already been studying psychology, trying to figure myself out. And once I sort of got clear mind, started healing myself, I really at that moment knew, probably more than I've known just about anything else in my life ever, that I wanted to be a therapist, that I wanted to be a helper, a healer. And particularly back then, I wanted to work with adolescents and young adults who had gone through what I'd been through. And I was in my 20s, so I was kind of scared of the grown-ups too. So, I like that. But what's been important for me has been to really look at my career much differently than my own recovery. So my own recovery comes first, because I believe anything I put before it, I lose, that I've got to have that intact. But that I'm not just a person in recovery counseling, that I'm a counselor and I'm a person in recovery. So I worked really hard. I went to graduate school, did an internship, went to graduate school up in Boston, came back down to Atlanta, enrolled in a doctorate program in child and adolescent psychology. I have always had sort of a hunger, again, that sort of seeker in me for knowledge. So I did a lot. I did a 3-year experiential therapy training. I got trained in Gestalt therapy, Ericksonian therapy. I had a lot of clients that struggled with trauma. So I got trained in different trauma modalities, and have, sought out over the years to have supervision with people who are experts in their field. And I've been very fortunate. Even when I was in graduate school, I was, one of our professors had studied in Ericksonian therapy, and she was amazing. I had another professor who was one of Salvador Minuchin's proteges. So I, really became interested in family systems. I was able to go take some workshops with Jay Haley and Chloe Madonis. So along the way, I've been fortunate to have individuals that I've learned from and that I didn't even know how great they were until later on. And then I've been able to really, just always continue to try and seek that knowledge. And then with that, building my career, trying to keep asking myself, what can I do better? How can I be a better clinician? How do I learn from the mistakes I've made along the way? How do I grow? I got trained in equine therapy. I got trained as a hostage negotiator. I went to the FBI training. I went to the NYPD training. So there are a lot of different trainings that I took. And all of that really came into who I am today. And, I love what I do. And I love what I've created, because I feel like, and then let me back up and say, I don't really think it's all me. Like when I say what I've created, it's all divinely inspired. Like I really work hard to keep my ego out of it. I mean, I'm always trying to learn and do things better. But I also have a better understanding of what kind of support families need, what kind of support the individual going to treatment needs, what kind of support someone with mental health needs. And I've really created a great team where we pull together and are able to do that. As my years have gone on, part of this phase of life that I'm in, which I suppose we would call my third act of life, has also been looking at all the years of what I've done and what have I learned, and trying to come back and say, let me pass that on. I have a duty to pass that on. Like I learned from people who had been doing things for a really long time too. I mean, I've been working in the mental health and addiction field for 40 years now, almost 40 years, 39. But it's a long time, and a lot of training and a lot of, learning and experience. And then how do I help pass that on? So, how do I reach a broader audience if they want to be reached? How do I help? And so that's been more my also getting on the stage and speaking. And, I can remember in my early, maybe like not early, maybe mid 20s, I was asked to go give some talks, and I kind of liked it, kind of did it, made me nervous. And then I gave a talk, and I was so nervous. I like stuttered through the whole thing. And then I looked at the evaluation, and like a third were good, a third were fair, and like a third were not great. And I didn't speak again for 10 years. I was like, I'm not going to do it ever again. I don't have to. You can't make me. And so when I came back out and said, okay, I'll get back up on the, on the podium, on the stage, and start speaking, it took a lot, of feeling like I'm going to throw up and faint at the same time. And, all of that. Now it comes pretty easy, but, pushing myself to kind of do the next right thing and do what is going to be most helpful, or maybe not, but the information's there, that's sort of, how I look at it.
And what's the best piece of advice you would give to someone who is starting out to be able to get to, well, where you are now?
The best advice I would give is always remain open and curious and wondering and open to learning. Once you get a graduate degree, that's where it just begins. So I would first say, get that training. I mean, you can't lose with getting the training. I mean, every day I'm so grateful that I have my degrees, that I have my license. There's not a day that goes by where I ever regretted that. And there are, many, many days where I'm just so grateful and appreciative. And I know it's hard. A lot of people in recovery, being in recovery is a great asset, but it's not everything as far as being able to be a good clinician. So it's that clinical training that's really been helpful too. It's sort of like I always think about it, like my husband's a lawyer. If I got arrested and had to have a lawyer, got through it all, it doesn't qualify me to go practice law. Like there's a lot more to it. So, get clear on what you want to do and then go through the steps to get there so you can do it safely and always keep that curiosity. And the other thing is never quit growing. So, and I mean that like educationally, intellectually, emotionally. I was in therapy before I got into treatment, and I've been in therapy throughout my, all these years. And that's been an important, asset in addition to 12-step programs and all of that, because there's a lot that gives me for support. But I do believe we can't take our clients anywhere we haven't gone ourselves. So that extra, healing, and then also staying open to learning. I mean, my license makes me get continuing education, but there's some workshops I go to where I am not thrilled with it. It's just like checking off a box, that I hate that. For me, I really like to find conferences where there are people there I really want to hear, like for the Evolution of Psychotherapy conference is one of my favorites, or the old ICAD conferences, because it was, again, like Evolution of Psychotherapy, I could go and I could hear, Bessel, I could hear, Peter Levine, I could go attend all the different trauma therapists who are experts and hear what they have to say and compare. I can do the same with, I could go hear Michelle Weiner Davis. I could go hear, Sue Johnson. I could go hear the Gottmans, Harville Hendricks, and hear all of the different theories for couples therapy, all in one, it's incredible. And so to just keep open and keep learning.
When did you start Heather Hayes and Associates?
It's a good question. So my career kind of, when I came back from graduate school, I did my first intervention in 1986, but I didn't love doing them. And when I came back from graduate school, back to Atlanta, I helped open up and work on a new adolescent unit. I had a private practice. I then began working. I was the only non-physician for this group of doctors called GADA, Georgia Alcohol and Drug Associates. It was Dr. Talbot, Dr. Wilson. And I love those guys because they were my doctors when I was in treatment. So it was like this whole, that was almost like a surreal, unbelievable, oh my God, I get to work with them. They were amazing. And my work there, I began working with clients who were in treatment, a lot of addicted physicians and healthcare professionals, some others who are, I helped do the trauma work or the anxiety disorder work or the eating disorder work. So I did a lot, so I had a huge private practice, got trained in play therapy. I worked with the little ones. I had, older clients. I saw couples. I did groups. And then about 2000, I began to change the sort of the focus of my practice. I think some of it was, I ride horses competitively. And so I wanted to be able to have more time to show. I didn't want such a rigid schedule. And, also I'm an addict. So there's part of me that's always looking for a little something new, the little novelty seeking. So I started doing more interventions. So, Heather Hayes, My company really doing that started around the early 2000s. And then I began to add support for myself because I was sort of a one woman show for a long time. And it was great, but I also needed more help and more support and more support. If I was sitting with a family and another family I'd work with needed help, they'd have to wait. And I didn't like that. So it really evolved. Heather R. Hayes and Associates, really came into name, I would say probably around 2017. But I had been Heather R. Hayes for a long time.
How has the company and how you work evolved over the years?
Well, that's a great question too. I think that we just keep learning and getting better. I think part of the evolution, is that I'm able to step back and my team's able to do a lot more intensive work with the family on the front end before I go in for the intervention. And what I love about that is that we stay with families for at least 6 months during the process. So they begin, and then, I go in, I help facilitate the intervention or the family meeting, and then they continue to work with the family on a regular basis. Also, I think it's evolved in that we do a lot more case management. So there are clients that we work with that don't even require or need an intervention. And then I started years ago. I was very uncomfortable from like the mid 80s when I was working on an adolescent unit, and I would work with teenagers who had been pulled out of bed in the middle of the night and drug into treatment. And they were angry about it, and they were mad about how they got there, and the parents had left the house, and I never felt comfortable with that. And so over time, I also began developing my own model of transport that really sort of has, I would say it is, clinically it's founded in a lot of the intervention techniques. It's sort of intervention, trauma responsive, but it also keeps all the safety pieces in place. So it's not, won't you please go? I mean, here's the decision your parents have made, but the family system is brought in, and we're working with the, with the family system before we have the transport. During the transport, the family is accountable to sitting down and telling their teen like how much they love them, what they love about them, and why this decision's been made. So they have an understanding, and the parents are again held accountable and able to really try and send their child off with love, not disappearing from the house, which didn't make sense to me anyway, because then we say, oh, you have to be involved in treatment, because if you don't do the family work, you can't just send your kid off and expect them to get fixed and come home. But why would we say, but we're going to start this process by telling you to leave, and we'll get him out of there for you, or get her out of there for you. So I developed a model called the Respectful Adolescent Transport Protocol that I'm very proud of. And so I do a lot of training of that, and I had tried teaching with transporters along the way how to do it. And finally, I just brought it in-house, because then I knew I could train everyone, make sure they had that clinical oversight, and that the model and the protocol was really followed. Right, that was one of the things I didn't care about with interventions in the beginning either. I didn't understand why you would be deceptive with someone and then tell them, that they needed to go get honest. And I understand now there are times where you have to use the surprise model because of safety issues. Like you can't give a heads up if there's domestic violence or child abuse, or you have someone who's at risk of overdosing, or, it has to be individually worked out. But the best of all models is where you can be more transparent and have like a intervention by invitation, where you let them know, hey, we want to get together with a counselor and have a family meeting. It doesn't have to be so scary. But you're right, changing that paradigm of it's okay to talk about feeling scared, and it's okay to say, hey, we've been talking to someone and we're getting some help. So one of the things that I think is so different, that's so hard now, is also seeing all of the basically poison in the drugs, and the fentanyl and the opiates and all of the overdoses. And so that's a part along my way too. So there's my own personal pain and difficulties I've been through in life, but then there's also been really trying to navigate the pain of society, of our parents, of our loved ones, who've got children's grandmothers, uncles who are dying of overdose too. And so that's a part that is also painful and different. And it makes me really grateful that I got into the rooms of recovery when I did and wasn't living in such a scary time in a scary world. So another message I'd give to the young people too is that it's so dangerous. And when I was young, when somebody told me it was so dangerous, I didn't really care, because I don't think I really cared that much if I lived or not. But there's a great life ahead. And it's a scary, scary time, more so than ever. Like sometimes people's first use is the last use. And so that's painful, and that's been really hard for me to watch, and things that have changed over the years.